Stephen C. Productions.
A limousine rolled up to me. I was on the street and I had some t-shirts in my arm, and I go, wow, a limo is pulling up right next to me, and the window comes slowly down, and right next to the window on the inside the car was Mick Jagger, and all I saw were these giant lips and Mick Jagger's face. I go, oh wow, man, wow, like that. I was dumbstruck. And he asked for, a dozen shirts, and I gave him the shirts. We made the transaction, and I said, I'm working your tour. He goes, I can see that.
You are listening to Talking from Experience. If you're a regular listener, welcome back. And if you didn't know, you're about to learn. My name is Steven, and I'm your host. I apologize, this episode is a little late, but I promise you it's worth the wait. Today I'll be talking with Mathew Gray. Yo, this man has lived one of the most interesting lives. From touring with some of the biggest rock bands in the 80s to cooking on a radio show to starting one of the very first internet chat rooms. This guy is super cool, and I'm so grateful to have been able to sit down and have this conversation with him so that I can share it with you. So let's hop on in. You're from Hawaii? Is that where you were born? Or is that just where you live?
I was born in New York. And then when I was 10 years old, my family moved to Los Angeles. They didn't tell me about it right away, but I eventually caught up with them. And then in 93, I moved to Honolulu, where I am today, Honolulu, Hawaii. So I can't move any further west and still be in the United States.
Right out of high school, right? You started touring with the Eagles, correct?
Yes. I was on tour with the Eagles while all of my friends in school were still doing whatever kids do after they graduate high school.
Right. So how did you get involved with the band, or was it something, were they your friends, or how did that happen?
Actually, it was my cross the street neighbors. They were older than us, so they're probably about 5 years older than me, and they were doing that kind of stuff, and they knew some of the merchandise companies who were handling rock and roll tours. So they said, hey, Matt, would you like to go on tour with the Eagles on their Hotel California tour? And I said, yeah, when? And they said whatever it was, April or May or something of that year, and I was due to graduate in June of that year, but I went out on the road with the Eagles on their Hotel California tour doing merchandising, and one thing led to another, and that kind of kick-started my whole entire life and career and all of that kind of crazy stuff.
You were the guy at the merch table.
I was the guy who handled the road tour crews, the people like you and I who would travel from city to city, handling the t-shirts, the programs, any of their merchandise that was commercially acceptable and legal to sell. And we did that for a long time. Worked with many, many big bands of the day, Fleetwood Mac and Pink Floyd, besides the Eagles, Supertramp, ELO, Jethro Tull, Rolling Stones, all of those big, huge bands of the 80s.
Who was your favorite band to tour with?
I liked them all. Got along very well because here I was this starry-eyed kid, living the drug, sex, and rock and roll world business and having a great time and drinking it in, and didn't have any cares or worries or commitments back home. And so I was just a young guy traveling and living the life. So, I think I enjoyed just about every single one of the bands that we worked with.
What's the most memorable story you have from tour life?
Probably the first time I met Mick Jagger was when I was on their tour doing merchandise for them. I had never met him before, and a limousine rolled up to me. I was on the street and I had some t-shirts in my arm, and I go, wow, a limo is pulling up right next to me, and the window comes slowly down, and right next to the window on the inside the car was Mick Jagger, and all I saw were these giant lips and Mick Jagger's face. I go, oh wow, man, wow, like that. I was dumbstruck, and he asked for, a dozen shirts, and I gave him the shirts. We made the transaction, and I said, I'm working your tour. He goes, I can see that. So that was a pretty outstanding moment for me.
Yeah, that sounds like a pretty on-the-fly nervous answer for meeting somebody at that level.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's so difficult to have to pull it together and deal with people when you're in sort of a momentary, where do I find my words kind of moment. And, I had a lot of those throughout my life, but that was the wildest one at first on the rock and roll scene.
I'm guessing it was a good impression, hopefully for both of you.
He knew that he was going to be tripping someone out, whoever I mean, he's one of the most recognizable faces in the world. So I'm sure when they rolled up to me on the side of the road, they had no idea that I would be as dumbstruck as I was. But, transaction took place, and then I got to know them, and then it was almost, like you and me, just kind of that's Mick, that's Matthew, and that was pretty much it.
Yeah, from then on, it was all just, he's no longer Mick Jagger, just Mick.
Exactly, because I was basically working for him. When you boil it all down, I wasn't working for my merchandising company. I was working for Mick Jagger on that tour.
Cool.
Yeah.
So first it was the Eagles, and then it was the Rolling Stones?
Then it was Fleetwood Mac. And then it was Pink Floyd. So the Stones were sprinkled in there, but I wasn't on a lot of their shows. I was just on several of them. But those other three bands, we did entire tours with. And during that time, Stephen, we were on the road selling bootleg merchandise to other rock and roll bands who were playing in nearby regional concert arenas. So we had a specialized vehicle, a big van that would go on tour with us, and they would be creating T-shirts that were bootlegged, meaning they weren't legally accepted to be able to sell. So we were working the legal tours and working for the merchandising company, working for the band, but the folks in the van behind us were making cheapo knockoff T-shirts to sell at other concerts that were nearby. So that was pretty expressive experience also, because that was like the Wild West for us.
Yeah, those are actually my favorite ones. I always try to find the bootleggers every time I go to a show because, they have, I like to say they have exclusive merchandise. You're not going to find it on the website and stuff like that.
That's entirely right. We had artists in the van behind us, and they would just make up stuff that was just so awesome. They could create album art and T-shirt art and anything you would want to look at for your wall. But we had them, and they were making T-shirts for us. And so as far as we were concerned, we were really happy, and we knew we were outrunning the law during that time. So there was a little bit of that outlaw part of what we were doing, even though we were legal on the one end. We were, running rampantly illegal on the other end. So it was kind of, an experience for us, almost like drug dealers in the T-shirt world.
Right. I don't think the consequences are as big for T-shirt dealers, though.
Right. But, there were times when we were in the South, like in Texas and Alabama and some of those states, where our guys would get arrested because they were selling illegal merchandise, or they got in a fight at a bar or whatever. So I spent a fair amount of my time when I was on the road bailing my guys out of jail and making deals with cops and law enforcement by giving them merchandise to let my guys out and breaking up bar fights. So I was like the protector and the guy who provided solutions for everybody. No one assigned me with that, but my basic personality is not an instigator. I am more of the problem solver and that kind of thing, the equalizer. So instead of instigating, I equalize, and I was always doing that even when I was young.
That's why they referred you to those other companies and with other bands.
Probably so. A lot of other young guys at that time, and people love to drink, and they love to fight, and they love to yell and scream. And I guess I have my moments, but back then I was kind of together. And so I was able to help handle people in crowds and situations around me.
How long did you do that for? How many years did you travel with bands?
Probably on and off about 5 years. During that time, though, Stephen, what I did was at one point I got on the United Kingdom tour with Supertramp and a few other bands, and I went to school in London for my culinary arts degree, and I learned that at a very prestigious school. And so I was able to work rock and roll and learn how to become a chef all at the same time. So that was really cool as well.
Is that something you'd been wanting to do, culinary school?
Ever since I was a little kid, I enjoyed food. I enjoyed eating, and I enjoyed watching my mom cook. I'd push our little doggy, Happy, next to the cabinet and step onto Happy like he was a step stool to see what my mom was cooking on the range. And that's how I learned about cooking and flavor and food and plate architecture and all of that stuff. And my mom dug it, and we grew up in a family that ate. Every time there was something to celebrate, we'd sit down and we'd feast. And when there were moments in our lives that weren't so good, like someone passed away, you would eat to drown your sorrows and to heal your heart. And we ate at each one of life's moments in between the joy and the sad. So food was a big part of my world for my entire life. Yeah.
Did you ever cook for any of the artists?
Oh, yeah. When I got back to Los Angeles after learning in London, I hired an agent, and the agent was put in charge of trying to find me work to cook. So I became the personal chef for a lot of people in the rock and roll world, and Robin Williams and Heather Locklear, and the producer of Flashdance, Top Gun, Beverly Hills Cop, on and on and on. All the Hollywood celebrities you could possibly think of. So I got to cook for them and get to see them in their real kind of attitude and personalities, away from the cameras. And so I got to see and learn about these people as regular, everyday folks, just like you and me.
I mean, to see them like that through the lens of, being a personal chef, I feel like, people are out there hiding in bushes and, trying to find out where they're going to have dinner tonight just so they can go snap a picture. And you had a skill set that allowed you to enter their lives through a different perspective. And I mean, in a genuine fashion. So that's really cool.
Right. I never would have been able to meet, 90% of the people I met during those years had I not been able to supply them a feel-good experience and a taste-good experience and things like that. So I was very fortunate.
Is that what you did right after the 5 years of traveling?
Yeah, well, after traveling and schooling and coming back to LA and then starting to cook for people in the entertainment world, I began doing that a lot. And then I started up a whole bunch of businesses in rapid succession over the course of the next 30 years or so. So when it comes to food, I had a company in Los Angeles called Pamper and Dine. My partner at that time, my girlfriend, was a masseuse. And I was a chef, of course, as we've been talking about. And we designed a business called Pamper and Dine to provide massage and fine dining inside of people's homes. So she would massage the husband and then the wife or whatever upstairs in their bedroom or whatever. And I would be down in their kitchen during this time cooking them a beautiful gourmet dinner. It was great fun for us because, once again, we got to meet all of these magnificent people and regular people all the way on up the scale and get to see people behind the scenes and get to really warm them up and learn about their lives and so on. So a big part of doing creative things is learning from the others. And so that's one of the big takeaways that I've been able to experience in my life.
Tell me about your greeting card business. How did that come about?
My partner and I at that time was just a friend. She and I were both into photography and both into art and so on. And then one day we stumbled upon a process, and it wasn't when we were very high, just so you know. And we stumbled upon a process that allowed us to take developed film and to be able to do artwork on that film and then put it through the developer once again. Now, this is back before the internet, when people used to take photographs on film, and you would then bring your roll of film into the developer, and they would print your shots for you. And that's when photographs were actual items that you could hold up, not just digital images on a screen somewhere. So we created this cool process, and I thought, wow, this might be sellable. And I started to shop it around and walk and go in and out of shops and gift shops and card stores and drug stores and on and on and on, just doing the pitch, just like this, saying, we have some really cool products. Here, take a look. Would you like to sell them? And it was just that kind of hustle that became Sublime Craft Work, which was the name of that business.
How did the bootleg merchandisers make their T-shirts back in the day?
They had a contraption or silk screen. I guess it was a silk screen kind of machine that was in the van, and it ran off of car batteries. I think they were using for the electricity aspect of it, and they would be making T-shirts while we were traveling 90 miles an hour in big old leased cars between cities. So yeah, that's how they did their thing. So nothing was digital back then. Remember, internet really didn't kick in until 93, 92, and then even for the next 5 to 10 years, it was still really, really slow before the internet totally took off.
Yeah, I mean, I just think about today, anybody can Photoshop something, or heck, even download an image off of off of the internet and, slap it on a T-shirt and have that delivered, and there you go. But car batteries and silk screens, that's an art form.
Back in the day, social connection and social skills were so important. And I think if you were to kind of take a time capsule from then to now, what I see from my perspective is that people don't have the same social skills they did back in the day because we relied on getting together with our buddies and seeing them in person. And when you're with people in person in your midst, you kind of get a better feel for their energy and what they're about to say, facial expressions, the way their eyes move, things like that. That nowadays, everyone being behind a screen, it's much more difficult to read situations and to be able to feel the real deal.
One of the reasons that I got into podcasting is because, it really is difficult, even with people who are in your personal circle, to actually get someone to sit down and have a, insightful conversation with you. I guess I have the type of mind that, I have to always nurture my mind. Like when I discovered podcasting, it was just, wow, like I'm learning so much, and it literally is just people sharing ideas and talking. And I felt like immediately drawn to it. And barely this year, I started doing this type of podcast format, and I've enjoyed it so much. And, just meeting new people and even getting to learn more about my personal connections through the platform.
If you're enjoying what you're doing, Stephen, I say go for it. It is always the first best way to start anything, is to enjoy it. And if you enjoy it, then it doesn't matter how much time you put into it. And if you enjoy it, the money will eventually come if that's what you're after. But that's what happens. So you get to hone your craft and your style, and you learn from others who you're interviewing and chatting with. And that thing just starts to snowball. And one thing leads to another, especially in communications.
Right. Speaking of chatting and communications, how did you get into talk radio?
I was doing talk radio in Los Angeles before I moved to Hawaii, and I had a show on a big rock station called K-Rock in LA, and I contacted them and said, I have a really great idea for a show. And they said, yeah, like everybody else. And I said, no, really, let me have an interview. Let me sit down, come in and explain it to you. So because I hustled the idea, I ended up getting a show, and we called it Mathew, the Primetime Chef. And the object of the show was to have listeners call in with compelling reasons why I should leave the radio station, drive to their house while we were on the air, and then cook for them once I got to their house or the location. So during that time, I cooked for an emergency room staff in the middle of the night, police precinct for all the cops who were on shift, the cubicle of a small little gas station person, a girl doing her laundry in the middle of the night, and so many other interesting experiences that I was doing. And so we'd finish up the show when I was at that location, and I would say, yeah, here I am. I'm at the emergency room, and or I'm at the police precinct. And we'd finish up, and we'd have the employees talk to the radio people who were back at the station. And we were doing that all by phone back in that day. So that was a really colorful, fun experience as well.
I love to hear stories about people using the phone to connect and stuff like that. So I remember growing up as a small kid in the late 90s, early 2000s, there would be the party lines.
Oh, right.
Where people would call in to see what's come of that with smartphones and social media. It's amazing, that it's still being used, not maybe the exact same way, but there's a reason it's still called a phone and not a mini computer.
Oh, that's true. People definitely want connection. When we're separated by things like the COVID shit show, people still need that connection. They need human touch. And even if it's coming through a screen, there's a way to communicate. There's a way to discuss, share, and exchange ideas and information. And that's what was missing from those times when you're absent from your social circle. So the technology is fantastic when it's used properly,
Tell me about the Love Radio Network.
Oh, yeah. In 92, I started lovelife.com, which was at one point named one of the top 1001 websites in the world by PC Magazine. And it was designed to be a vehicle for our radio show, which was called Love Life Radio. And also my chat room that I started. I started one of the first ever chat rooms, and it was text chat, not voice chat. And that was called Hawaii Chat Universe, where I was able to connect dozens and dozens of people at the same time from all over the world by way of my website. And so Hawaii Chat Universe really kind of started getting the ball rolling before other chat rooms came online.
I'd like to hear your opinion on whether you think How do you see the world as people relating to one another? Is it better? Is it worse? How's our connection looking like to you?
Well, sadly, Stephen, as I mentioned a little while ago, I think that even though this technology is amazing and all the information on Earth is at our fingertips, as far as human communication goes, I think that social skills are way down. I think that people's ability to be tolerant with each other is way down. I think that the political divide that has occurred in the last number of years is worse than ever. And when I look around, I see what other countries are doing and how they're hurting other people. I think that, on a universal level, there's a lot to be reckoned with right now. And that saddens me. So it's very difficult to look outward onto the whole earth when really all we can do is communicate with the person who we're with at this moment, or the person who we're going to meet when we go out to the market or wherever. So I'm feeling a little bit pessimistic right now in some ways, based on the way that the world has been and the way that the news is being presented.
I like that word you used. People are being less tolerant of one another because you can go on social media and follow only the things you like, and you can choose to completely ignore the stuff that you don't want to hear about. And, when you do see it, it's immediately block that or, keep scrolling. So I feel like that's kind of leaked out into real life, to where, as soon as somebody has a minuscule point of view that you don't agree with, like immediately that's the enemy.
I see that all the time, Stephen. That's a great point. A lot of times because of the instant attention, short attention span theater that the world is now, people won't give you the time of day if you're not, massaging their eyeballs or making them feel good with one thing or another. They just blow you off like that fast. And I think that is a dangerous mistake to make in life.
And then everybody just walking on eggshells trying to tickle everybody's ears,
So true. That instantaneous kind of like scroll to the next screen type of, 15-second thought process. I think that the brains of the people who are following that kind of media or that kind of technology is only going to make for kind of like dumbing down the world instead of getting into good, strong, in-depth conversation and understanding.
I mean, from my perspective, I actually am seeing it start gravitating more towards longer form content, because I think at one point it got to the point where people were watching 10-second videos, even like 6-second videos. And now I'm seeing more TikTok and YouTube. They're starting to do podcasts on their platform. Like, it's crazy to think, podcasts on TikTok, which, I mean, that was the one with the 10-second videos. People are getting tired of ear and eye candy.
That's such an interesting thing, Stephen. I didn't realize that TikTok was now looking at going towards more long-form content.
I heard about it this week, actually. They haven't rolled it out yet, but TikTok.com/podcasts is coming soon. So the fact that the podcasting industry is growing, and even the smallest podcast platforms, they're getting listeners. So people want to, hear more diverse perspectives and understand points of views that you can't get from a 10-second clip. Even the daytime talk shows, everything is super scripted, and the host comes on and they go behind the scenes and tell the guest, okay, I'm going to ask you this, and this, you're going to answer this, XYZ, and then even then they cut down the interview into a 30-second clip of the highlights. And sometimes without context, it's hard to really understand where a person is coming from. That's what I love about long form content.
Yeah, long form allows for people like you and I to be able to do what we're doing right now without the constraints of big business and big sponsorships and people telling us what to do and bosses looking over our shoulder. So we're responsible for so much, and yet look at all these wonderful benefits that can occur. And when you're talking about TikTok, like you just did, I think the adults in the room probably finally have realized that this kind of conversation, the kind of shows like you're doing, are the shows that are going to get people's attention, that maybe they could, like for me, instead of watching a 15-minute YouTube, I might lay down before I go to bed and just turn on a podcast and listen to it as I put my head on the pillow. And that's where long form for me really works. Or when I'm driving, I can listen to a long form show. So not everything has to be visual. There definitely is a lot of room for what we're doing right now. And I think that having choices like a good menu, having small choices, large choices, and things in between, all different flavors, all different colors, is really what we need to do. We need to fill that spectrum with all of this wonderful stuff.
I find it so interesting that I've always tried to avoid the spotlight, yet here I am, creating a show that's kind of, I'm the host. I promote it on my social media, and I'm out here socializing with people, and that's something that I never really was too big into. But here I am because I'm passionate about sharing ideas and learning from others.
I think we all evolve over time, and you sound like you were the kind of young kid, just like I was. I like to talk, I like to watch others, and then I finally learned somewhere along the way, there's a little bit of a trick in a psychology to getting people to understand you and hear you and be interested in you. And the way that you do that is by showing interest in them first. And that's the biggest psychological tool you can use if you're trying to persuade, or if you're trying to befriend, or if you're trying to sell someone else. Get them talking about themselves a little bit, and there you go. You're off to the races.
I had this friend who we used to have this joke where it's like, I know too many faces and not enough names, and they all seem to know me. That's another reason that I wanted to give a platform to other people. Somebody asked me the other day, what's your podcast about? Well, it's a conversational podcast. Like, oh yeah, who do you have on there? All kinds of people who have different perspectives. Like, oh, are they famous people? I'm like, not all of them. And they were like, so they said, I'm going to challenge you. Who wants to listen to random people talk? And I actually thought about it for a while, and I was like, well, I don't know, but for starters, I do. And if creating a podcast is a way for me to get to meet and talk to all kinds of people, then so be it, because that's what I want to do.
Exactly. What would really have been the chances of you and I meeting on the street somewhere? Probably slim to none. And this way, with your great broadcast here, you have this opportunity to reach out, find people who are like-minded, find people who are curious, find people who are really smart, and who want to spend, some nice moments with you. I think that that's a great thing.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, the second person who wants to hear random people talk is them. Like you said, let people talk about themselves. And, that opens up so many doors. That alone, just getting two people in a room and them talking about themselves to each other.
Exactly. There are little tips and tricks that are utilized in conversation and in business and in team structure that lends itself very well to doing the podcasting and the interviewing and the speaking. So the give and take is just a great experience, isn't it?
Yes. And I mean, I always find myself listening to conversational podcasts, and I'll laugh out loud to myself, and I want to chime in, and I'm like, wait, they can't hear me. But it's you can feel the energy with the two people just feeding off of each other, learning from each other and exchanging ideas. And it's a powerful thing.
How are you marketing this broadcast, and how do you put it out to your social media accounts? And are you planning on getting onto TikTok yourself? And will you turn this into a video thing for YouTube as well and just do the whole thing?
I do want to get into YouTube. So I'm doing the audio only just because it's easier to edit. And I feel like I'm getting more comfortable with my interviewing. So once I'm ready to do that, I'll go ahead and invest in that fancy camera, or even, heck, I have a pretty decent phone, which I'm using right now.
The technology is not even close to as important as the personality. So as long as you keep bringing personality, you can always then add on technology to do all the things that you want to do. But if you don't have personality, it doesn't matter what kind of lights, what kind of microphones or cameras or anything else, it won't go anywhere. So yeah, I think you're doing it in the right process, in the right way.
Yeah, thank you. It means a lot coming from somebody who's with experience in broadcast.
So where are you located? I forgot to ask you.
Oh, yeah, I'm in Houston, Texas.
Oh my gosh. So have you been watching the Yankees and the Astros?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Are you a fan of either team?
Astros all the way.
Well, yeah, they are playing incredible baseball.
I actually don't follow sports that much, but when any of the teams makes it to the playoffs, it's such a huge thing here. So you just can't get away from it. So I might as well just jump all in and join everybody because it's so much fun.
Oh yeah, definitely is fun when your hometown team can go, this far into the season and the postseason. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah, definitely. So, question just popped into mind. So, whenever you were doing the radio show and you would go out and cook at people's houses, I bet there's some golden nuggets in some of those experiences.
Oh wow.
Were you ever in any type of like dangerous situation or something that you thought, this is kind of sketchy?
There were people who would know the location if let's say it was the precinct of the LAPD or a certain emergency room, there would be people who were listening to the radio show who would try to find me or go to the locations that were the winners of that show. There were a couple of sketchy moments, but for the most part, back in that day, people were pretty cool. A lot of young people were high and, pretty accepting. And, it's a different world nowadays, but nothing too sketchy. During the cooking days, I mean, I almost set Robin Williams' house on fire. I don't know if you'd call that sketchy, but it was kind of an experience. So, we had the LA Fire Department show up and police were there and sirens were going. And then after all that crazy stuff, we got back into it and enjoyed the evening a little bit.
To him, that was a sketchy moment. For you, it's probably just embarrassing.
You never want to set anyone's house on fire. Come on, Steven.
Yeah. Water damage is the way to go.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Oh, you guys get a lot of that. You get a lot of weather down there, don't you?
Oh, yeah. Fingers crossed. Hurricane season's almost over.
Oh, boy.
Well, I don't want to take up any more of your time. I enjoyed the conversation. I really appreciate you joining me. It's a really good conversation. I definitely want to do it again.
Thank you, Stephen. I'm going to tell you two different words. They're Hawaiian words, and we use them all the time. One is aloha. Have you ever heard that word?
Yes.
Aloha means both hello and goodbye, and it means a whole bunch of other different meanings like love and care. So when you say aloha to somebody, you're only saying really, really good things. And the other word is mahalo. And that's what I want to say to you right now for having me on your show. Mahalo means thank you. And you've had a really, really nice touch and approach, and I appreciate that. It was great meeting you, and thank you so much for having me.
Anytime. Oh, I've got a question about another word.
Yeah.
Hanaho.
Hanaho is like with great blessings or happiness, that kind of thing.
Okay. Yeah, I've heard it before. I was like, I like that one. Hanaho.
Well, like welcome. I do have a list of off-color Hawaiian phrases. So anybody who listens to our show here today and who wants it, maybe they could contact me and I can give them a list of off-color Hawaiian phrases.
All right. Awesome. Yeah. I'll put that contact info on the, in the
put
show
my
notes.
email address on the show notes, Mathew at HawaiiFoodTours.com. And if anybody wants to contact me or if they are planning on visiting Hawaii, I've got a book called The Ultimate Eater's Guide, Hawaii edition. And I can also send them the best single cookie recipe in the world. I promise.
All right.
Thanks, Stephen. Take care.
All right. You too. Bye-bye.
Aloha.
Man, what did I tell you? What a guy. What a life. Mathew, thank you so much for hopping on and sharing your experiences. I really enjoyed myself in this conversation, and I can't wait to have you back. All the links to connect with Mathew Gray will be in the episode description. Send him an email. Let him know you heard him on the show. I know he'll appreciate it. Links to connect with me are also in the episode description. I appreciate you clicking one of those. Let me know your thoughts on the show. An honest rating and review on your favorite podcast player is also greatly appreciated. I just want to thank you so much for even tuning in and listening. My guests and listeners are the reason I do this. So truly, thank you so much, and we'll talk next time.